How Oscar Indigo broke the universe and put it back together again. You haven't heard the last of this. Since this was game 2 of the series, the Yankees were the home team at Mount Etna Diamond, which meant the Wildcats came to bat first. Their pitcher, Robocop Roberts, who was not bad, sat Axel, Bobby, and Steve down in order. And just like that, the bottom of the first rolled around and the Wildcats took the field. Oscar settled into right. Lourdes lined up in front of him at second base. She didn't look his way, and she didn't give him a big smile, or any of the stuff ace players do in stories when a rookie hits the field for the first time. But they were on the same team, playing on the same grass, and they were comrades, even if she wouldn't look at him, even if he'd destroyed the universe. In center stood Carlissimo Fong, popping his fist into his glove and inspecting the turf around him for obstructions and gopher holes, just in case. And over and left, Kamran Singh glided into position like a gazelle skimming across the savannah, until he got his feet tangled and stumbled and came within a centimeter of face planting in the turf. But he regained his balance and slid to a halt, bouncing on his toes, ready for action. Sure, Oscar was nervous, but he was in the lineup. He knew that for the first time in his life, he belonged. The turf was his, all his, the right half of Mount Etna Diamond, to protect and defend. Every blade of grass, every crumb of dirt, every moth fluttering amid the final rays of the setting sun, every molecule of air. And sure, the fate of the universe hung in the balance, but now Oscar was on the field, and he knew he'd play a part in the Wildcats' victory over the Yankees. Or at least he really, really hoped he would. The Yanks' third baseman led off, Christopher Conley. The Wildcats' pitcher, Kevin Trow, wound up and tossed his best fastball straight down the middle. But Chris kept his eye on the pitch and smoothly sliced it over Lourdes' head to center field for a single. And then the ball bounced into the seething vines that grew on the outfield fence, which grabbed it and wouldn't let go until Kamran and Carlissimo both reached in, found the ball, and tore it loose. And by then, Chris was on second with a ground rule double. This must have rattled the pitcher's cage a bit because he then gave up a single to Robocop. And so Kevin found himself facing Taser Tompkins, the second best hitter in the state after Lourdes Mangabat. Unfortunately, Kevin served up a fat, juicy strike. Taser smoked it like a meteorite over Oscar's head. It seemed to make a sizzling sound as it passed. Oscar didn't even have time to react before the ball ricocheted off the wall straight to Carlissimo, who'd run over to back him up. Carlissimo threw it home before any runners scored, but still, 3 batters. 3 runners on base. Not a great way to kick off the most important game the Wildcats had ever played. And then Biff Stroganoff strolled to the plate, swinging his shiny red aluminum bat with menace. "You got this, Kevin," called Oscar. Kevin wound up and threw a curveball. The problem with Kevin's curves was that they didn't really curve. They floated toward the plate like big, juicy beach balls, ripe to be whacked. And at that plate stood Biff, wielding a bat large enough to stop a charging Volkswagen. So Oscar did what he was best at. He hoped. He hoped the curveball would actually curve. He hoped Biff would whiff, or if not, he hoped Biff would fall down, or a bug would land in his eye. He hoped that something, anything, would keep him from belting a grand slam in the very first inning of the game upon which the future of the universe, thanks to Oscar, depended. Biff swung and smacked the living tar out of poor Kevin's sad alleged curveball. A maelstrom whirled in Oscar's brain. Hope and fear, optimism and dread. The colors of the night ran together, edges blurred and sounds muddled. Biff's shot flew straight at Oscar, and Oscar jabbed his glove in the air. He hoped for the best, and then, by some miracle, the ball smacked right into the soft, supple pocket of his baseball mitt. He'd caught it! Biff was out! But as Oscar jubilated, the Yankee on third tagged up and started running toward home. Oscar drew back and hurled the ball toward the catcher. His throw arrived half an inch ahead of the runner. "You're out!" cried the ump as Axel nabbed him. Axel then zipped the ball to third, and Leighton Brooks caught it neatly, tagging out the oncoming runner. 3 outs, end of the inning. Awesome, Oscar, he heard Kevin Trow cry. You started a triple play. You saved a run. Wow, was all Coach Ron had to say as Oscar trotted to the dugout. And Oscar felt like part of everything that had ever gone right on a baseball diamond in the history of the entire game. It was all he had dreamed of and more. He scanned the stands. No sign of his mom. And his dad hadn't made it. But what was that voice, high and strong above all the others, cheering? Way to wing it, Oscar! Miss Ellington at his game. Oscar couldn't help it. He grinned from ear to ear and pumped his fist in the air. Miss Ellington pumped her translucent, delicate, liver-spotted fist right back. She'd known he needed somebody there to cheer for him. She'd come. Mr. Scarrett and Mr. Lim tipped their hats from high in the third base stands. Oscar sent a dab their way. He realized he was starting to like those guys. And he knew he'd tell his mom about the triple play after she got home from work, and he'd tell his dad too, next time they talked. He'd done something great at the game and hadn't even cheated. Surely this was a good sign, a step in the right direction. Nice play, said Lourdes, dropping onto the bench beside him. Thanks, said Oscar. And that was how Oscar Indigo solved the problem of what to say to Lourdes Mangabat. When all else fails, talk about baseball. Even if you only exchange 3 words, at least it's a start. Silence descended between them. Oscar stared at his mitt. Then he noticed a set of letters, possibly initials, carved into his glove. E-E-S. Huh. Miss Ellington's, from when she was young. He wondered idly to himself what Eleanor Ethel Ellington's last name used to be. Something beginning with S. When he looked up, the Yankees were taking the field for the top of the 2nd inning. Taser stomped out to the mound to pitch. When Coach Ron saw Taser, though, he went charging from the dugout. That's against the rules. He pitched last night. He's not allowed back on the mound for 2 days. You're just putting him in because he's your best pitcher. The umpire, who was Bobby's granddad, Mr. Farouk again, squinted at Taser. It seems to me that he did pitch yesterday, said Mr. Farouk. What? Cried Coach Pringle, sprinting out of the Yankees' dugout. That's nuts. This kid didn't pitch yesterday. Did you pitch yesterday? Mr. Farouk asked Taser. No way, said Taser, staring at him like he'd lost his mind. What are you talking about? What's the problem? Asked Taser's mom, huffing and puffing her way into the middle of the small crowd on the mound. Nothing, Mrs. Tompkins, said Mr. Farouk. I have this under control. Please return to the stands. As the president of the Slugger League Board of Directors, declared Taser's mom, I have a right to know what the problem is. You know what it is, shot back Coach Ron. Your coach is trying to pitch your son 2 games in a row. Prove it, said Sheila Tompkins. Yeah, said Taser. Prove it. Wait, said Mr. Farouk, digging around in the pocket of his giant black umpire jacket. I still have last night's lineup card. Sheila Tompkins and Coach Pringle exchanged uneasy looks. Deli pickup number, said Mr. Farouk, sorting through a stack of rumpled papers. Comcast bill, car wash code. Here it is. He held a battered card 6 inches from his nose and squinted. He began to read aloud. Wildcats versus Yankees, July 5th, pitching for the Let me see that, shrieked Taser's mom. She snatched it from Mr. Farouk. She looked it over. A rogue gust of wind blasted in from left field. Somehow, the card slipped away from her and fluttered away over the bleachers. Oops! Cried Mrs. Tompkins. I do not think, began Mr. Farouk, but the noise and the dust of the wind gust made it impossible to communicate. And this lasted for almost exactly 19 seconds. Oscar couldn't help noticing. With no proof, shouted Mr. Farouk over the dying wind, ruefully gazing in the direction the lineup card had disappeared. I have no choice but to allow the young man to pitch. That's not fair, cried Coach Ron. Since I have no evidence, my hands are tied, said Mr. Farouk. I'll file a protest, said Coach Ron, though he clearly realized the protests were futile. You should. Maybe you'll win. I would love to be overruled, said Mr. Farouk. But Taser's mom is the president of the league board of directors. I think your chances are slim. Now, play ball! And play ball they did. And surprisingly, despite the Yankees' pitching shenanigans, the Wildcats had some luck of their own. Lourdes smacked a homer off Taser, and even though Taser threw his glove in the dirt, Coach Pringle was heard to shout, "It's okay! Nothing but a lucky shot! She's no good! She's just a girl! We'll score 10 runs when we come up to bat." As Lourdes passed third, Robocop stuck out his foot to trip her. But, pretending not to notice, she scampered home to put the Wildcats ahead. Wildcats 1, Yankees 0. And after that, the Wildcats held their lead for the next 6 innings. Coach Ron was ecstatic, but no one was happier than Oscar. He felt like he was getting somewhere. The universe, unfortunately, seemed to have other plans. By the 8th inning, Kevin's arm had gotten so tired he could barely get the ball to the plate. He let Robocop on base with a walk. Then Taser came to bat and watched 2 of Kevin's weakening pitches go by, and grinned and waggled his bat, knowing Kevin's arm had turned to jello. After that, Taser knocked the next pitch out of the park, driving in Robocop, not to mention himself. He took off around the bases at a leisurely pace, gloating all the way home. Yanks 2, Wildcats 1. The top of the 9th rolled around. It was the final at-bat for the Wildcats. Coach Ron looked nervous. "Wildcats," he said in the dugout, "this is it. We've got half an inning to put ourselves in the lead. 3 outs, 9 strikes. We need this win. Who's up?" He checked his roster. "Mangubat? Go out there and knock it a mile." Lourdes did her best, but all she could manage was a single. Carlissimo Fong struck out on 3 straight pitches. Leighton Brooks suffered Carlissimo's fate too. And then it was time. Coach Ron checked the lineup sheet. The entire team held its breath as it waited to hear who was up next, although everybody already knew. "Oscar?" Coach Ron's voice wavered. Oscar swallowed. Here he was again, the game resting on his shoulders, and this time, along with it, the universe. "We could use another homer," said the coach encouragingly. "We need somebody to drive in 2 runs. Go out there and bring in Mangubat, and while you're at it, bring yourself around too." Ice formed along Oscar's spine. His lungs hardened into stone. His legs refused to move. "Listen, son," said the coach. "Whatever your mojo is, you need to unleash it again, right now." "I don't know if I can unleash my mojo today," said Oscar. "Why not?" asked the coach. "I left it in the bread box," said Oscar. "What?" asked Coach Ron. I don't think I have my mojo with me right now," said Oscar. "If you had it with you last night, then you have it with you tonight," Coach Ron reassured him. "People don't lose their mojo that fast." "Maybe some people do," said Oscar. "People like me." "Listen, Oscar," said the coach. "We appreciate the high fives and the enthusiastic grins you've displayed all these years. We really do. We like the Oscarade, pretty much. But high fives and ear-to-ear smiles and Oscarade don't win baseball games. Home runs win baseball games. And I'd really like to win this baseball game." "I would too, Coach," said Oscar. He missed the old Coach Ron, the nice one, the one who told him things were okay no matter what. But he knew that coach was now going the way of the bees. One more wrong for Oscar to put right. "Then go out there and smack the ball over the fence just like you did last night," shouted Coach Ron. "Right," gulped Oscar, "like I did last night." "Batter up," called the umpire. Oscar made his way to the plate. It was only 10 yards from the dugout, but it took him over 150 years to get there. Or at least that's how much he felt like he'd aged during the journey. The crowd had gone silent. Oscar thought of Lourdes, out there on base, depending on him to get her home. Mr. Lim and Mr. Scarrett were watching, along with Miss Ellington and half of East Mount Etna. He stepped up to the plate. The light of the setting sun seemed strange and far stronger than usual. For now, Oscar was the only one who knew why. A second sun intensifying the light of the first. Taser drew back. He fired straight at Oscar's rib cage. Oscar danced out of the way, just in time. The ball whomped off the backstage. Ball one. Wild pitch. Taser didn't care. So what if he was now one pitch behind in the count? So what if Lourdes had trotted to second base? It was worth burning a toss, giving up a ball, letting the runner advance, just to show Oscar who was boss. Now he was going to throw 3 straight strikes and send Oscar and the rest of the Wildcats home with tears in their little loser eyes. Taser wound up. He launched a rocket. Strike 1. Indigo has been here before, Vern. And remember, he delivered a fat, juicy home run, Susie. All he needs is one good pitch, Vern. Taser served up the next toss. The ball came at Oscar like a torpedo zooming down a pipe, except harder to see. Strike 2. Prospects are looking a little dimmer for Oscar Indigo, Susie. The kid is doing his best, Vern. Let's hope it's going to be good enough. Taser came set on the mound. He went into his motion. Oscar gripped the bat. He locked onto the ball. The lights blazed. The base paths rolled like ocean waves. Panic rose like a tide in his gullet. The pitch seemed to be headed for his ear. He ducked. He heard the plink of leather against aluminum, felt the sting of the bat on his fingers. He opened his eyes. The ball rolled slowly away from him in front of the plate. Fair ball, called the umpire. Run, Oscar, run! Voices yelled from the Wildcats' dugout. What? Oscar cried, but he realized in a flash what had happened. Taser had been trying to pitch close to his head, and when he ducked, his bat poked straight up in the air behind him. Accidentally, he'd hit the ball, at least 7 whole feet, so he started running. Lourdes was already halfway to third. Oscar sprinted for first. The Yankees catcher, Biff Stroganoff, scrambled to pick up the ball and hurl it toward first. Oscar closed in on the bag. He galloped like he'd just robbed a bank. By the look in the first baseman's eyes, Oscar could tell that Biff was about to make the throw. Would he get to first base in time? Oscar gave it more gas. He stretched his stride out and pumped his arms and ignored the burning in his thighs. His foot hit the base. The ball hit the first baseman's glove. Safe! He heard the ump yell. But as he crossed the bag, he could tell the play wasn't over. A chorus of cheers exploded from the bleachers. Home! 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 Cried the Yankees infield. Oscar saw Lourdes rounding third and pushing for home. Oscar could only watch helplessly as the Yankees' first baseman fired to Biff Stroganoff, who was guarding home plate. Lourdes dove, but she was too late. Biff blocked her way like a mid-sized dump truck, clutching the ball in his mitt. The ump cried, You're out! A stunned silence fell. Lourdes climbed to her knees but couldn't seem to stand. A look of horror crossed her face. She'd just made the biggest error of the series, of the season, and the Yankees had won the game. Susie and Vern let their opinions be known. Young Indigo did his best, Vern. Mangabat just got too ambitious, Susie. That's where you're right, Vern. Sometimes the tale doesn't end happily ever after. Of course, the Yankees flooded the field, and Yankee jubilation ruled. Wise people say there's nothing worse than a sore loser. Wise people add, except a sore winner. The Yankees were not wise people. Lourdes, did you bring your lunch money? Cried Taser, dancing around the infield. 'Cause we just took you to school, added RoboCop. Wahahaha! Do the robot, boys, cried Taser's mother, which was the cue for Taser and RoboCop to demonstrate how RoboCop had earned his nickname. Taser pretended to turn a giant key on RoboCop's back. Once he'd wound Robo up all the way, RoboCop transformed into an automated fist-bumping machine, a life-size rock'em sock'em robot. He bumped all the Yankee players twice, 3 times. Then he roboted himself over to the Wildcats' dugout and began bumping fists with them, which was not a whole lot of fun for the Wildcats, since if they ignored him, they seemed like bad sports, and if they bumped him back, he laughed. People say RoboCop Roberts thought that routine up himself, Susie. When he was 5, Vern. It never gets old, Susie. Well, it kinda does, Vern. When RoboCop got to Lourdes, she tried to ignore him, but he scooted himself in front of her no matter which way she turned. Lourdes, he said in a flat RoboCop voice, you played a very nice game for a girl. And even though his voice was machine-like, his eyes shone with malice. He turned and bumped Taser, who was standing beside him. Lourdes trembled with anger. Why are you so mad? Demanded Taser, watching her closely. He was being nice. Shut up, cried Lourdes. You did your best, said Taser. The problem is, you rot, so your best wasn't good enough. Leave her alone, Oscar cried, stepping in between the bullies and Lourdes. Who's gonna make us? Sneered Taser. You? Jeered RoboCop. Ha! How about if I make you stop? Came a voice from behind Oscar. Let me know if you need help, chimed in a second. Mr. Lim and Mr. Scarrett. Taser glanced up and saw the two men. He tried not to look scared, but Oscar saw the color leave his face. Whatever. I'm out of here. See you losers next game, said Taser, backing away. He scuttled after RoboCop, who was already halfway across the parking lot. Clearly, RoboCop remembered their last meeting. Lourdes, called Oscar, but she was already stalking toward the gate, head down. It's okay to make a mistake once in a while, he told her. She stiffened and turned back to him. It's not okay. I lost the game, snapped Lourdes. People are making fun of me. I'm a complete failure. But it's just one game, said Oscar. He did his best to sound upbeat. Stop being so positive all the time, yelled Lourdes. It's exasperating. She crossed the street to the bus stop just as the bus pulled up. When it roared away, she was gone. In the silence, Oscar said to Mr. Lim and Mr. Scarrett, she's right. I shouldn't be so positive. I haven't found the watch. I have no idea how to put the 19 seconds back, and we didn't beat the Yankees. And now Lourdes is mad at me. Professor Smiley told us to tell you that all adds up to a huge problem, said Mr. Lim. But he said if we're lucky, things may hold together until tomorrow's game. And if they do, you have one last chance to win. Plus, we've got one more thing to tell you, added Mr. Scarrett. Something's going on in the Mount Etna Stadium. There's this fellow wearing an old-fashioned Boston Braves uniform. I would think he's another of those 19-second flipper gibbets, but he's been sticking around a lot longer than that. Really? Asked Oscar. Where is he? Just kind of hovering by himself at the end of the bleacher seat, said Mr. Lim, like a ghost. I'm going to go talk to him, said Oscar, even if he's a ghost. I want to see why Boston Braves are shadowing me and find out what he knows. He shivered lightly. You need our help? Asked Mr. Lim. No thanks, said Oscar. I've got this, but I appreciate the offer.